What if everything you knew was a lie? What if I told you the reason Adolf Hitler hated Jews wasn't just political, but something personal, something psychological and deeply rooted in failure and fear? We've heard the same surface-level explanations. Hitler was a madman, a dictator, a racist. But none of these tell us why he became obsessed with eliminating an entire group of people. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change the way you look at history forever. This isn't just about war. It's about identity, obsession, and a twisted search for meaning in failure. A genocide demands an explanation. The Holocaust was the single most horrific genocide of the 20th century. Over 6 million Jews systematically murdered by Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler and S. rule. But why Jews? Why such specific and intense hatred toward one group? Historians have debated this for decades. Was it religious hatred? A political tool? Or something deeper? Something dark within Hitler himself? To truly understand this hatred, we have to go back, not to 1933 when Hitler took power, but to his youth, his failures, and the ideological poison he slowly consumed and embraced. The origins: failure, rejection, and humiliation. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889 in Braunau am Inn, Austria. He grew up under a strict and emotionally distant father, Alois, and was deeply attached to his mother, Clara. After her death, Hitler was left even more emotionally unstable. But the real turning point came when young Adolf moved to Vienna to pursue his dream of becoming a professional artist. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts and was rejected. Twice. His work was deemed technically insufficient. This wasn't just a disappointment, it shattered him. For years, Hitler lived in poverty, selling cheap postcards, eating at soup kitchens, sleeping in shelters. And here'd add what most people overlook. Many of the people who helped him during this time were Jewish: doctors, shopkeepers, and even landlords. So where did the hatred come from? The answer lies in how Hitler processed his own failure. Not by reflecting inward, but by blaming outward. Vienna's toxic influence. The birth of hatred. Vienna at the turn of the century was a melting pot of cultures, religions, and ethnicities, including a large Jewish population. It was also a breeding ground for radical nationalism and antisemitism. Hitler found a new set of beliefs in the works of Karl Lueger, Vienna's mayor, who openly used antisemitism to gain political power. Newspapers, pamphlets, and street speakers blamed Jews for everything from rising rents to the collapse of traditional values. This was Hitler Hexie's first deep exposure to the idea that Jews were not just different, but dangerous. He didn't hate Jews as individuals at first, but over time, influenced by Vienna's far-right ideology, he began to view them not as people, but as a threat, an obstacle to the purity of German identity. War, defeat, and the stab-in-the-back myth. When World War I broke out in 1914, Hitler enlisted in the German army. He served on the Western Front, was wounded twice, and awarded the Iron Cross for bravery. But after Germany's defeat in 1918, Hitler was devastated. He believed Germany had not lost on the battlefield but had been betrayed by enemies from within, particularly Jews and Marxists. This idea, the so-called stab-in-the-back myth, became widespread in Germany. It falsely claimed that Jewish politicians and communists had sold out the German military to secure peace. Hitler clung to this narrative with religious devotion. It gave him a target for his anger and humiliation. The Jews were to blame for Germany's fall. Racial obsession and the myth of purity. By the 1920s, Hitler had transformed his hatred into a twisted ideology. In his infamous book Mein Kampf, written while in prison after a failed coup, Hitler described Jews not as a religious group, but as a biological enemy, a disease infecting the Aryan race. He believed in racial purity, a pseudo-scientific idea that humans belonged to hierarchies of race, with Aryans at the top and Jews at the bottom. He saw Jews as manipulative, dangerous, and parasitic, destroying everything they touched. To Hitler, the solution wasn't coexistence. It was elimination. He believed the Jews were behind both capitalism and communism, a contradictory but common anti-Semitic conspiracy. He saw them as corrupting German culture, economy, and racial health. This was no longer just political. It was pathological. Antisemitism as a political weapon. But Hitler wasn't just a believer in anti-Semitism, he was a master at weaponizing it. During Germany's economic crisis in the late 1920s, with unemployment high and inflation crushing families, Hitler offered a simple message. It's not your fault, it's their fault. The Jews did this. This populist, scapegoating message worked. It gave people an enemy to hate, a reason to rally around the Nazi Party. By blaming Jews for Germany's problems, Hitler gained power, support, and eventually control of the state. Once in power, he turned anti-Semitic ideas into state policy. The Nuremberg Laws, Jewish ghettos, forced labor, and, finally, death camps. Psychological theories, projection, fear, and rumors. Some psychologists suggest Hitler's hatred was more than ideological. It was psychological. He may have seen in Jews what he feared in himself: weakness, failure, alienation. Some unconfirmed rumors suggested he had Jewish ancestry, something he obsessively tried to disprove. Could it be that Hitler's hatred was a twisted form of self-hatred? That his persecution of Jews was a way to destroy parts of himself he couldn't accept? Others argue that Hitler was a classic narcissist, obsessed with purity, strength, and dominance. Jews, being successful in many fields where Hitler failed, symbolized everything he wasn't, and everything he feared. When hate becomes genocide. Once Hitler solidified power, there was no turning back. He built concentration camps. He orchestrated mass deportations. He created the final solution, the complete extermination of the Jewish people. This wasn't madness. It was systematic, organized, and planned with chilling precision. The Nazis dehumanized Jews, portraying them as rats, disease, filth, making it psychologically easier for ordinary people to become murderers. This was not just hate. It was hatred institutionalized. So, why did Hitler hate Jews? The answer isn't simple, because Hitler himself was a complex, disturbed, and dangerous individual. But, to summarize, he failed in life and looked for someone to blame. He absorbed radical anti-Semitic propaganda in Vienna. He believed in racial pseudoscience and purity. He used scapegoating as a tool for political power. He projected his own fears and insecurities onto the Jews. Hitler's hatred was not just ideological. It was personal, psychological, and weaponized for mass manipulation. Why this matters today. History isn't just about the past. It's about understanding how hate spreads, how lies become laws, and how one man's delusions can lead to the deaths of millions. Understanding why Hitler hated Jews helps us recognize the signs of rising hate in our own world, and gives us the power to stop it before it grows again. If this video opened your eyes, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Comment below, what do you think was Hitler's real reason for hating the Jews? And remember, history forgotten is history repeated.